Okay, I think we're going to get going. We're hoping to be joined by the Municipal Research Bureau, but I will hope that they will arrive in process. Let me just, I say that, but I have to find my gavel. Oh, there it is. Sorry, Carrie. False alarm. All right. I'm calling this hearing of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councilor and also the chair of the committee. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will be rebroadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. We'll be taking public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email Cora, CORA.Montrond, MONTROND. That's Cora, CORA.MONTROND at boston.gov to sign up. When you're called, please state your name and affiliation or residence and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that we can hear all comments. And I want to thank those who've already signed up. And you can also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.wm@boston.gov. That's ccc.wm, as in Ways and Means, at boston.gov. And again, I want to thank those who have already sent written testimony to be part of the record. Today's hearing is on Docket 0164. It's an order for a hearing to discuss property taxes and assistance programs for seniors and long-term residents facing difficulties during COVID-19. It's been filed by Councillor Flynn, and we're expecting to hear today from Commissioner Nicholas Ironello, who's our Commissioner of the Assessing Department, also from Pam Coker from the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. And before we turn to the panelists, I want to recognize my colleagues and give them an opportunity to say an opening word. So we've been joined here today, of course, by the sponsor, Councillor Ed Flynn from District 2, also Councillor Andrea Campbell from District 4, Councillor Michael Flaherty at large, and Councillor Liz Braden from District 9. So Councillor Flynn, I want to go to you first.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. Thank you, Chairwoman Bach, for holding this hearing, and the panelists for being here today. More importantly, I also want to thank so many neighbors who contacted me regarding this critical issue impacting so many middle-class working families in our city, including our seniors. I called for this hearing immediately in the new year after dozens of constituents reached out about significant increases in their property taxes this year. We're here today because I'm extremely concerned about the impact on our seniors, long-term residents, about their ability to remain in the city that they helped build and love. In these difficult times, I fear that this significant increase may place us at an inflection point for many working families, and whether they have the ability to remain here, or whether Boston will lose part of its soul and become a place only for the wealthy, only interested in wealth storage units that we have seen as foreign investors sometimes do. I recently met on Zoom with many longtime South Boston neighbors and City of Boston Assessing Commissioner Nicholas Ironello. These are working families who brought their homes decades ago, well before property values skyrocketed. They are not wealthy, and some are facing significant challenges in paying an additional $4,000, $5,000, or even $6,000 more this year. With significant less disposable income, I am also concerned about the potential ripple effect of this tax increase to our local economy at a time when we are also encouraging neighbors to please do everything they can to support our neighborhood restaurants that are being hard hit by this pandemic. I fear that the timing of this increase could also have a devastating impact on our small businesses, the lifeblood of our economy. I thank Commissioner Ironello for his professionalism and the hard work he and his staff at the Assessing Department are doing to help our residents navigate what programs that they may currently qualify for, such as tax abatements, the residential exemption, personal exemption for our seniors and disabled veterans, blind neighbors, surviving spouses, as well as tax deferral programs that I hope we can also discuss today. I think it is helpful to raise awareness about these existing programs and the ability to contact the taxpayer referral assistance program. But I think it's incumbent upon us to go even further. 2 years ago, I was proud to work with City Councilor Lydia Edwards as the original co-sponsor to pass an ordinance in the City Council to allow low-income senior homeowners who owe back taxes to establish property tax agreements with the city. At a time when so many are working people are facing economic insecurity, I believe that the city in our body must do the following and consider the following proposals. I'll be very brief here. Due to the ongoing COVID-19, we should look to pause any further property tax increase for the duration of this pandemic. It is my understanding that the city was looking to explore that further as well at one time. As many of our seniors are facing financial hardships because of COVID, the city of Boston should also consider potentially doubling the elderly exemption for seniors over a certain age. We should explore increasing residential exemptions. We should look at creating an exemption for long-time residents, 55 years and older, that have owned their homes for over 20 years, provided that they meet income and other relevant criteria. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the many longtime neighbors who own a triple decker and rent out a floor or two at reduced price, reduced rents to their neighbors so that they can remain in Boston. They could easily rent to the highest bidder, but they choose not to and will unfortunately face an additional burden for doing so. I realize this is a personal decision, but we talk a lot about affordable housing. I think we should also acknowledge these neighbors who contribute a lot to affordable housing in our city without any fanfare. They have done the right thing as their brother's keeper. Again, thank you, Councilor Bach, the panelist, Commissioner Arenello, and your staff. They're very dedicated, very professional, and my neighbors, central staff as well. They do a tremendous job. Thank you, Councilor Bach.
Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn. Next up will be Councilor Campbell, and then Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Braden, and we've been joined as well by Councilor Julia Mejia at large. Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Bach, and thank you, Councilor Flynn, for your leadership on this very important and timely issue. Thank you also to Councilor Edwards and you, Madam Chair, for your past work on this issue as well. My team and I have been inundated with calls and emails from residents, including countless seniors and elders, and all have been outraged by the dramatic increase in the recent property tax bill. And what's worse, they didn't expect it and they didn't know what to do when it came. And given the pandemic and the fear that so many folks have about their economic stability at this moment in time, at a minimum, I would have expected the city to at least have informed residents that this was coming before they got their bill and assign points of contact for folks to follow up regarding abatements, application processes and deadlines, and other relief they could access, especially to assist our seniors who so many, of course, live on fixed incomes. I'm absolutely looking forward to this hearing to discuss specific and immediate relief we can offer our residents during this crisis. I appreciate Councilor Flynn laying out some specifics in his opening remarks, and also look forward to discussing, how we might pause an increase during the pandemic, how we might double that exemption for seniors or increase the residential exemption or create one for longtime residents. I think all incredible ideas. I will add, I think we also have to think about how we simplify the processes and applications that folks have to do in order to receive these benefits and this relief. Many folks do not have access to the internet. Many folks, of course, do not speak English as a first language, but need relief now. And so really looking forward to discussing how do we reach those harder to reach residents who have major concerns around their current tax bill and their inability to pay that. We obviously want to support all of our residents during this crisis and this public health crisis. I, of course, also want to thank the panelists today for the work they do every single day, for fielding my team and the calls and the constituents we've sent your way. Thank you for the feedback. I also want to thank central staff and looking forward to the hearing. Thank you, Councilor Bach.
Thank you so much, Councilor Campbell. Councilor Flaherty.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair, for hosting this morning, and for our colleague, Council Flynn, for sponsoring, for my colleagues for attending, and also to the Commissioner. I know he attended a hot and heated meeting a couple of weeks ago with Council Flynn and I, and so I appreciate his attention to detail on this, and the timing is never good. I concur wholeheartedly with the lead sponsor, as mentioned in his opening, with every single remark. Timing couldn't be worse on this matter, particularly given we're in a pandemic and a lot of folks have been out of work. And I think to the original tax code, I think the original intent was to protect the middle class and to keep the middle class. And what we're seeing now, as Boston's been Manhattanized, we're becoming the city of the very rich and the very poor, and the middle class are being squeezed out. And this just is one more reason why people will pick up and leave the city, and that'll be an absolute travesty. So not sure what can be done at the city level to reverse the decision that was made, first and foremost, or maybe at the very least put it off until after people can get their legs underneath them and get back to work and get their families and their investments situated first and foremost, and then go from there. So I'd like to get those thoughts as to why now and why we can't put it off, or can we get some type of special exemption in the meantime in partnership with the state to kick this can down the road, and or go back to the drawing board and have a formula that's more fair and more accurate as to what's actually happening in the neighborhoods. As Councilor Flynn alluded to, particularly with outside investment, we want to move our city forward, and we want constituents, particularly neighbors and abutters, to support growth and development. But if the message is going to be, a couple of years down the road, you're going to get walloped with an increased tax bill through no fault of your own, based on what's happening around your property, not your property. I think we have to reevaluate the criteria and the formula that we'll put forward here. So that's my 2 cents on it. Look forward to this hearing. And again, I appreciate Madam Chair calling for a meeting in the morning, and for Commissioner for participating. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Next up is Councillor Braden, then it'll be Councillor Mejia, and we've also been joined by Councillor Lydia Edwards from District 1. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Councillor Flynn for bringing this very, very important issue up. I think I want to echo the sentiments and statements of my colleagues. Our elders especially are feeling under a lot of pressure due to this increase in real estate taxes. Many of them live on a fixed income. They don't have the ability just to find money out of the air to pay an increased real estate tax. So I also feel, this is not the time or the place. We're focused on just the immediate, to see if there's any immediate remedies to this issue. But I think we need to have a broader conversation about housing for our elders who maybe are living in larger homes than they need, but they want to stay in their neighborhoods, and we're not making any we're not really planning to have them stay in their neighborhoods. So that's a whole other conversation I'd like to have on another day. Thank you so much. And I look forward to, thank you to everyone who's written in with testimony, and thank you to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Mejia.
I'm sorry, I'm having really bad internet. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you now. Yes. Or we could. Councillor Mejia?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So thank you to the chair and to the sponsors for calling this hearing. I'm really excited to join you all today. As the first person in my family to purchase a house, I know how incredibly important it is to be able to keep up with your taxes, and having very little education on how you go about doing that is something that I'm also looking into in terms of how do we educate the public about all of this. But I just wanted to just say that our office sat in a City Point Neighborhood Association meeting, and that we're really looking forward to finding ways to offer greater assistance to seniors, long-term homeowners, and other people who are facing a budget crunch, especially during COVID-19. We learned that so many of our residents are completely caught off guard with these property taxes increase. This is an issue of information justice, which is one of the things that we talk a lot about. what people know and how are we going to go about educating them. One of the other things that I want to highlight is that we learned during the CPNA meeting is that exemptions cannot be combined. So if you are a veteran and you are elderly, you are not able to receive both exemptions. We as a city need to be more intentional about understanding intersectionality and
Councillor Mejia, we just lost you mid-sentence. Councillor Mejia? I think we will go to Councillor Edwards, and I will give Councillor Mejia an opportunity to finish her comments if she'd like, when she gets reconnected. Councillor Edwards?
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity to briefly just again thank Councillor Flynn in his partnership previously for helping to make sure we provided payment plans and interest tax relief for seniors. But I also wanted to also acknowledge, yes, that I got a lot of calls as well from many of my constituents concerned, feeling that there was a disconnect in who seems to be burdened in this moment. I also think that it's time for the city to really ask ourselves how creative we're being in the partnership we bring to the table to help our seniors. Specifically, I think we've been talking about this and dancing around this, and we've been trying to push on this. I think we need to be talking about pilot payments, and we need to be talking about our nonprofits contributing amounts that we need in order, especially if we wanted to streamline or make sure that they're at the table to help our seniors. There's got to be a balanced way to bring them to the table to provide relief to our seniors and also to analyze how we are generating income. This is a complicated conversation, and it only is more complicated because of the COVID crisis that we're in and the limited income that a lot of people are able to get and generate at this moment. We've talked about this at the 30,000 foot level, but as a city, with 70% of our income being property tax related, we are bound to hit a point where either property tax values are going to hurt our entire budget, or where we're going to be so dependent on them that we can't afford not to just continue to have a lot of development and push for more luxury units in order to generate the funds that we need. So let's have a real conversation. It's seniors today, it'll be other people another day, but at the end of the day, how we're making money is too property tax dependent, and we need to think of other ways, especially pilot payments, to help out.
Great, thank you, Councillor Edwards. I want to allow Councillor Mejia to finish her statement. I think she's rejoined us.
Yeah, so I don't even know where I left off with my statement, just because my whole situation is a bootleg operation right now.
We heard you cut off. You had commented on the fact that you couldn't get the veteran and elderly exemption and that we needed to be more intentional about intersectionality. That was where we lost you, I think, right at the word intersectionality.
Oh, I appreciate you letting me finish my thoughts up in here. Let me see where I was, because everything is not working right now. Yeah, so I mean, I guess the point that I was really trying to make is the fact that you can't combine the exemption. So if you're a veteran and an elder, you won't be able to receive both exceptions. And as a city, we need to be doing more about being intentional, about understanding the intersectionality in everything that we do. And in light of COVID-19 pandemic, we need to be leading with the community and responding to their needs. And I hope this hearing will produce some real results on how we can go about doing that. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Councillor Flynn for bringing this to light, and to you, Councillor Bach, for hosting.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Mejia, and to all the councillors who are here today. For my comments, I just want to, certainly echo what a lot of folks have said about the frustration for our constituents, and I think that, and especially that element of surprise, and one of the things that I've heard from constituents is also that when the amount goes up significantly, if paying that significant increase is all on the back two payments of the year, it can really be hard for folks who are budgeting. And so also trying to think about how do we message anticipated increases in ways that let people plan better for them is it's not the whole puzzle, but it's a piece of it here. The thing I want to say before we go to the commissioner is just that what I have found digging into this problem, and it's been alluded to a few times by counselors, is that the way that our property taxes are assessed and the exemptions that we have available are almost entirely dictated by state law. And I think that that's a frustrating thing for our constituents to hear, and it's frustrating for us when we're trying to come up with tailored solutions. And one of the biggest challenges is that the state law doesn't necessarily let us distinguish between kind of some of these most hurt populations and like big corporate landlords. And that's really the distinction that we're all trying to make here is how do we keep our long-term residents? How do we keep, our small businesses that own their buildings? Like these distinctions that are real in terms of like people's lives in the city and like Councillor Flynn said, like the real community we're trying to anchor here. Those distinctions aren't currently made in the law. What encourages me is that just about every distinction that is made in the property tax law of Massachusetts right now was successfully pushed by the people of Boston. So there was a time when there wasn't even a difference between the residential and the commercial tax rate. And the people of Boston said, hang on, we've got to change this so that when we've got long-term residents who are living in their houses, there can be a difference in the rate they're paying versus the rate that's being paid on these commercial properties downtown. And the residential exemption, which we're talking about, whether it should be increased, et cetera, that was also brought in by the people of Boston advocating at the legislature. So to me, it feels like this moment, I sort of hope that the conversation we have in this hearing and the places that we go next with it are saying like, okay, well, you know what, we may need to intervene again, the people of Boston, in the conversation at the State House in order to get programs that work better and at keeping our whole community and keeping that middle, as Councillor Flaherty said, in the city. So I'm encouraged by some of the things that Councillor Flynn sort of started with here today, and the idea of us kind of really looking to put new and well-tailored programs into place, because we don't want to give a huge windfall to Citibank because they own property downtown or whatever. And frankly, we can't afford to because of all the critical programs we need to fund for our residents. But I would love to see this go in that kind of state legislative direction. And I also just want to say that at the front, because I a number of times have asked Commissioner Arnella, well, why can't we do it this way? And found that the answer has to do with state law. So I want to start out, because I know we've all got a lot of questions, and so do our constituents, but just with acknowledging that he does quite a lot of good work within the parameters of a lot of constraint here. So with that, I want to go to the commissioner, and also our second panelist will be going as well to Pam Coker from the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. But start with Commissioner Arnella. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, councilors. Thank you, Kenzie, for framing the discussion. And thank you, Councillor Flynn, for calling the hearing. I think it's important for us to always pay attention to and kind of review how our property tax system works and who it hits and what we can do to improve it, what we can do to make sure that the system isn't hurting anyone in a way that we don't want to happen. I think probably a good way to kind of start the conversation is to talk about some of the things that the city and the city council have done together that have really been good for our residents. And I think that that's kind of a good introduction in terms of thinking of what else we can do and where we can kind of go from here. So a couple of those things were mentioned briefly, and that's classification and the residential exemption. And I just want to maybe give a little more context about how much those really help our residents and where that value is and what those programs do. So the classification program, which to an extent you all know about because it is a program that the city council and the city have to approve every single year. And every year it comes up for a vote with city council. And every year you approve the amount of the levy that gets moved from residential to commercial value property. This year, the city council and the mayor elected to maximize the amount of the levy that was shifted from residential value to commercial value. What that means is that the residential tax rate, so the real impact of that, right, is the residential tax rate went out at, I want to say $10.57. Without classification, the tax rate would have been $14. So we're talking about a 30 to 40% increase on top of everything that you guys are talking about that would have happened if you did not vote for classification. And so that's a really important program, and I think that is a program that might be worth looking at further and seeing if there's a way that we can get more value for our residents out of the classification program. So that is something to think about. The other program that has been mentioned a few times already is the residential exemption program. That is also a program that the city council and the city have to approve every single year. And that is a program that the city council has recently elected to maximize. You maximize it every year, but that was the vote that we had in December. And that was at 35% of the average value. So in practical terms, what that did was that basically exempted the first $295,500 worth of property value for all of our residents that qualify for that program. And so that's $3,150 off of their tax bills is the practical impact of voting for that program and maximizing that program. That is another program that might be worth looking at. It is a program that is something that is, both these programs are also things that are relatively revenue neutral. So I know a couple of the councilors have mentioned, the city's reliance on property taxes and potential budget impacts, and wanting to make sure that we don't get ourselves into too deep of a hole. So the residential exemption program and the classification program are both about shifting who contributes to the public good. So the classification program shifts that from residential property to commercial property. And the residential exemption program shifts it from low value residential property to high value residential property. And that all happens through that tax rate setting process. And so that's how those programs work. We also have a number of exemption programs. Those programs aren't built into the rates, and a couple of those have been mentioned already. But we have programs for the elderly. We have programs for disabled veterans. We have a program for the blind. These are all programs too that should be clear are all set up within the confines of state law. And so when we're talking about changes to the programs, they are things that we need to work through the confines of state law, and they aren't merely policy decisions. Things like the exemption program, the classification program, the policy tweaks that we potentially have there are lowering them, which is the opposite direction of what you guys are talking about. But because we're currently at the maximum, if we wanted to kind of increase the benefit to residents, then that would mean a state law change to make that happen. And then we also have some deferral programs that I think are really good options potentially for constituents who are kind of in a short-term crisis, maybe due to COVID and things that they might be able to take advantage of if they meet the qualifications of those programs. I'm not sure if I'm happy to take questions or take the conversation in whatever direction you would like it to go in.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. I think what we'll do is I'll go to Pam and then we'll do a round of questions and conversation with counselors just so that we've got everything out on the table. So next up, I want to turn to Pam Coker from the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you, Councilor Bach. I appreciate the opportunity to join you for this conversation. I remember a similar conversation probably about a year ago where in particular some residents came and testified and were feeling very frustrated and very challenged by the trying to get through a process to get some help. And I think Since then, I think the city has done a really good job of continuing to do its best to get word out there and also sit down with residents as needed. I know Nick's team has done that. And so I don't necessarily have a lot to add. I appreciate that the chair mentioned the property tax classification piece that shifts revenue, that shifts the property tax requirements onto business in this city. And that has been done for some time and allows residential taxes to be a little bit less than they otherwise would. I know that the current challenge of the impact of COVID-19 and the property tax bills folks are getting for the last 2 quarters of the year are looking it's a very jarring experience, because the experience of our residents and our businesses that are seeing higher property tax bills at a moment where their real in-person experience is a lot of loss and challenge and struggle to find their own resources. And so just I want to add to the conversation that the process that state law lays out, where a city bases its tax bills on that property value from a previous year. And I'm very much generalizing that. And so Nick could probably explain in a little bit more detail exactly what that is. But it means that when a property tax bill shows up on your doorstep, it's not recognizing the property value and the property market at that moment, the moment you're experiencing. And I think that continues to be a challenge for a lot of our residents and businesses that are taxpayers when it comes to the property tax. And that's a challenge all over the state. As I said, that's something in state law where there's a lag between assessing property and then when it's when it shows up, the results of that show up in a tax bill. Beyond that, I also just want to echo the comments about the programs that are currently available. Again, in a previous hearing on this issue, we had seen that for some folks, and I'm sure going to hear it again today, that despite what's available as the state allows in terms of relief and programs to provide various types of relief, that for some folks that's not doing the job. And so I'm curious to hear about more about what the administration and some of the counselors are thinking about what else could we do? And yet at the same time, what could we do that ideally keeps the impact revenue neutral for the city? Because property taxes, as we all know, do go towards providing the services and other types of resources and support that the city needs to provide for the Boston community. So just noting that there's a balance there that needs to be taken into account as we look at how much relief and to what extent and for what purposes, if there are going to be consideration of changes to the program. I guess that's just about it for now, unless there was something specific beyond that, Councillor Bach, that you wanted me to speak to.
No, I think I'm grateful to you for being here and being a resource for counselors and their questions. We will go now to counselor questions and then we do have a number of members of the public signed up to testify. So just for counselors' reference, I think what we're going to do is I'll go through a round of questions for everybody. I do ask people to kind of try to keep it to that 5-minute mark. And then once we've gone through a full round of questions, I'll turn to the members of the public who are here to testify. And then if there's a follow-up set of questions, we can go to those, but I don't want to keep them waiting indefinitely because we do have a bunch of people signed up. So if you think you've signed up, or you're a member of the public, we've got a whole list of folks. And again, if you're watching this and you want to sign up to testify, you can email Cora, CORA.MONTROND, Cora Montrond at boston.gov. So I'll just start with a couple of questions, Commissioner Arnello, and then go to Councillor Flynn. So and I just want to make sure that I kind of understand this correctly. On the classification front, my understanding is basically the way that you have to do it is there's kind of a total amount that property value, let's say, has grown in the city in the year. And then there's kind of, and the state sort of says, okay, so you've got that kind of total amount, and then here's what you would charge property value. Oh, sorry. And then within that, there's a total amount it's grown, and there's an amount that our levy, right, the amount that we charge in property tax is allowed to go up. And so that's like our max bar for what the city can be charging everybody collectively who needs to pay property tax. And the first thing, if we didn't have classification, is you would take that number, that total number, and you would divide it evenly across everybody based on the value of their property, and you charge everybody the same rate. And that's what you were talking about, right, with the $14 thing. Like right now, we're charging in the sort of $10.50 range to our residents. And then, but if we didn't have classification, if we treated the businesses and the residents the same, it would be that, like, sorry, what's that rate? It's 14 for, are we talking about, I'm forgetting it, square or $1,000 of value? Is that what it is?
Yes, it's per $1,000 of value.
So right now it's about $10.50 per $1,000 about value. If we didn't have classification, it would be $14 per $1,000 of value. These are round numbers. I know you have the like dollars and cents exact numbers. But then because we have classification, we're basically allowed to shift some of the burden that would be on those residents over to the commercial side. So we're basically shifting that $3 over, so we get our residents down to 10.5, and then as a result, our commercial's going up. What is our commercial this year?
The commercial it's around like $24.50.
Okay, right. So significant, and it's way more than the $3 because there's way more residential taxpayers than there are commercial, right? So to make up the difference, you're charging the commercial a lot more. So we end up charging the commercial like more than twice as much per $1,000 of value as we do the residents. So my understanding when I called you on this, and this, I just want to kind of, since we're in the public hearing, talk about it, is that part of the reason that valuations went up this year is that we've hit that ceiling of how much we're allowed to shift over. Like we can't shift anymore by the state law to the commercial off the residents. And the resident values keep going up faster than the commercial values. And so that's our problem, is that we've got this crazy appreciation in values on the residential side, and the commercial's been more moderated. And so to keep that residential rate low, we would want to shift even more, but we've hit the ceiling of that shift that's allowed by state law. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah. No, that is a fair characterization. And so that is one of the reasons. So for the past 2 years, actually, the residential tax rate has increased ever so slightly, while property values have been going up. And that's because the overall bucket of residential property value has been growing faster than the overall bucket of commercial property value in the city. But for context, so right now this year, the residential rate went up from $10.56 per $1,000 of value to $10.67. But back in fiscal year 2016, the residential tax rate was $11 per $1,000 of value. Before that, it was $12.11. It was, let's see, the highest in recent history was $13.14 in fiscal year 2013. So relatively speaking, for the past decade or so, the residential property rate is still pretty low, and also with a much higher residential exemption than we had during that time period of the around 2015, 2016. So 2015, when the tax rate was $12.11, the residential exemption was $1,900 is what you got off your property tax bill. So that's gone up to $31.50 while the tax rate has gone down. So relatively speaking, over time, our tax rate has gotten more affordable when you're just looking at the tax rate per $1,000 of value. The impact that people are feeling is due to higher value properties being worth more. So if you have a lower value property, like in the $500,000 range, your taxes are still about $2,000 a year, more or less. But it's what happens is, and the reason that people notice the impact so much is when there's a value increase, your property goes from $500,000 to $600,000. All of a sudden, percentage-wise, your taxes go up a lot because the residential exemption has been taking away so much of that burden. But the whole system and the way it's set up now is not theoretically bad, because it is theoretically set up to be a system that impacts people on an equitable basis, and that if the city is doing its job properly and it's valuing everyone at their fair market value, then you are paying your share into the same percentage as someone with a higher value property, except the higher value property doesn't get the full benefit of the exemption. And so actually our system is currently set up to be very favorable to people with lower valued properties. But that still doesn't clearly take away from people that are frustrated with tax bills going up.
Right. Our problem is that we have a bunch of people on fixed and more moderate incomes who now are holding very highly valued properties. And so the benefit is based on the property value, not their personal circumstances. And so it's that mismatch, I think, that's creating a lot of the challenge for us. And it's helpful for you to note that residential exemption, we did also put in as a progressive piece to try to help those lower valued property owners. But I think, yeah, you're seeing just property values go up so much that many more folks are falling outside of getting the main benefit of that. Yeah, I just wanted to register, and I'm going to go now to Councillor Flynn. I just wanted to register that the dynamic you just described with classification, where residential property values are rising faster than commercial ones, and it forces us to we've hit our ceiling on shifting the levy. That seems to me like it is likely to continue as a problem next year, because although none of us know where the future is taking us, most of us think that commercial property values are going to be a little waffly next year, at least compared to residential, based on what we've seen so far. And so I just really want to second Councillor Flynn's suggestion that there may need to be some kind of a pandemic related intervention to stop another increase like this happening because of the automatic systems that the state has. So just really wanted to register that. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Councilor Block, and thank you, Commissioner. And I'll be very brief. I know other councilors want to ask questions, and we have a lot of testimony as well. But I guess my main point is many of my constituents that are seniors bought their homes 20, 30, 40 years ago for $20,000. They're retired now. They're living on fixed income. They may have retired from the city or the state, and they have a small retirement monthly payment. The value of their property has skyrocketed. Their retirement has not gone up or gone up that much, but they, now their house is valued at $1 million, and they're still trying to struggle paying bills on that retirement. That's the issue that we're trying to address. But for a long time, homeowners, say they've owned their home 20 years or so, and they're over 55 years old. Could we begin to think of a plan that would assist them during this, especially during this difficult time?
I think that's an option that we can consider. So right now on the books, we have a long-term homeowner deferral program. That was a home rule petition that the city council worked on in it's around 2016, 2017, I think calendar year 2016. But maybe, so everything that we're talking about, to add context, is something that's going to require statute change, right? And so we're, whether it's home rule petition or something else of that nature, they're, even when they move fast, it's still like a relatively slow moving process, as you're all aware, and there are good reasons for that, but it can definitely be frustrating when you're trying to be nimble and deal with a situation like the one that we're facing now. But it's maybe it's worth revisiting that long-term homeowner deferral, and maybe if the criteria there or the interest rate there isn't something that we feel is beneficial, then that could be something that might be worth taking a look at. We also have the 61A deferral program for the elderly, which is a nice program, and I know the city council voted to move that interest rate to 1% last year, and so that is a potential option. But it is also possible that the income and asset restrictions on these programs might be a little difficult for people to meet the criteria for. And so it might be worth looking at those levels and seeing if those are things that make sense or if they should be tweaked a little.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just my final point, I'm wondering, just thinking out loud here, if there's probably a handful of proposals that could benefit residents if we had some approval at the state level. I'm just thinking, are we able to come up with some type of working group of residents and city officials to put all the proposals on the table, write them down, and discuss them at length, and then figure out which ones we may or may not want to go forward on. Have a list of these proposals that could help property owners and have a working session to discuss them, and then see how we can go forward and try to make changes or implement them. That might be a way to go.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting idea, and I'd be happy to be available to help out with that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know there's a lot of people watching this on at their home. If someone does have a question, and you've been very responsive, and your staff have been very responsive, what's the best way to reach you guys?
So the best way to get in touch with us, since pandemic and all, clearly we're having this meeting over Zoom and not in the council chambers. Don't want to encourage people to rush into City Hall. So the best way to reach out to us is to give a call to our Taxpayer Referral and Assistance Center. That phone number is 617-635-4287. And we have great staff there, and if they can't answer your question, they can help you figure out who can and kind of direct you to the right place.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilor Block, no further questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. And I'd also love to be part of the working group idea. So Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. And yes, count me in for that working group as well. And Commissioner, thank you for your hard work and your team, right? Obviously responding to a lot of calls. And I'm sure you could use more human capital in the midst of this pandemic. So thank you very much for your responsiveness. I just have a few questions. I do recognize that much of this does fall within the power of the state, and we have to send bills up to the state to change many of these things, which is frustrating to us as counselors, and of course frustrating to our residents, because we want to have immediate solutions for them. And it obviously all of us feel powerless at moments to be able to do that. So I'm just curious, based on the limited authority that we have here, and this is mainly for the public, what can we do now, if anything, to offer some immediate relief to those folks who are unable to pay? And then my second question, which relates, is there are a lot of folks who obviously were trying to go through the abatement process if there was some error in assessing. And I think the applications were due, I think it was February 1st, correct me if I'm wrong. And so I didn't know if there was any options for residents who maybe missed that deadline, if there was something we could do there. And then I have a couple more questions.
Sure. So thank you for your questions, Councilor Campbell. So the initial one, I would say anyone that's struggling to make payments, I would strongly encourage them to call our Taxpayer Referral and Assistance Center and see if there is a program that we currently have that they might fall within the parameters of. That's really kind of the top line takeaway there. You're correct that our abatement period, the filing deadline actually, because of the snowstorm, got moved to February 2nd. But it's another statutory set deadline, and so that's not something that the city has the discretion to extend. I think you mentioned, and forgive me if it wasn't you, Councilor, but I believe that it might have been you in your open remarks. You mentioned something about notice going out to the constituents about the tax increase, and I just want to mention that, not that it helps anybody now if for some reason they didn't get it, but my department was definitely concerned about getting information out to constituents. And so when we have this kind of recertification process, all that's required by the state is to throw up a public notice on our website, or like one of those little tiny public notices in the newspaper. We elected to send a mailing to every one of our taxpayers, so 160,000 parcels in the city, in late October, to notify them that we were going to have a disclosure period that we had in early November, to kind of give them a heads up about what was going on with their property value and give them an early opportunity to address any concerns that they might have at that point in time. I understand that people might not have gotten that, or might not have taken advantage of that opportunity. But the city really is, we do work to try and get out to constituents, and I think our department has two main goals. The first goal is to have accurate data, and then another goal that is equally important, and top line right there with that is constituent outreach, so that people at least understand where their values are coming from, and they have an opportunity to correct any errors if there are errors.
No, I appreciate that, Commissioner. And my only concern when I think about outreach, and I actually apologize for not lifting that up, actually, the mailing was, some people pay attention to it, or some people get it and they think it's complicated, it's legal. It's not, hey, your taxes are going up, people, be prepared, right? And I think, in bold red. And so I would have been really, frankly, pushing even the mayor at Oppressor to say, people, just flagging for you, a mailing is coming out from our assessing department to let you know, unfortunately, based on state law, state provision, assessing, that, many of you will see an increase, and that, call this number, reach out to this person to be able to assist. And so we just was thinking about more creative ways to get people this information in as simple a way as possible. Taxes going up. And I think because a lot of folks miss that. And was that done in different languages as well?
So the flyer itself was in English, but we did include an insert with translation information and access information with that flyer. So we didn't, there's only so many pieces of paper we can fit in the envelope.
Right.
But we did make an attempt to kind of get that out there and have it be available and accessible to everyone, no matter their circumstances or language needs.
So thank you, Commissioner. I do think, to the extent we get to this working group, really thinking about how we can think about more ways to inform constituents when this type of information that will obviously shock them financially is going out to them. And so whether that is via TV, and a lot of our seniors still tune in to television, right? Or other creative ways as well. And especially around language, or how we even use some of our work, partners on the ground who are working with our residents, whether it's healthcare providers or others, other infrastructure that we have to be able for folks to get the point, right? I think we can only do so much, and your team as well. So I appreciate that. And then my last question is really on data. And Councilor Brock, to be fair to my colleagues, I can send those requests to you via email around who applied for abatement, what does it look like, and can sort of come back in the next round to be respectful of my colleagues in public testimony.
Sure, that would be great, Councilor Campbell. And yeah, we're happy to, if you can send those to me, we'll send them on to Nick. And I will say that in the past, the assessing department's been very responsive to us with data requests. So.
Oh, and on that point, obviously a lot of folks receive that notice or mailing. I'd be curious how many folks actually, responded to us in between October, right? Because then I think determines whether or not the mailings are effective, or we should redirect those resources to maybe some other outreach strategy. Thank you, Councilor Bach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. And Pam Coger from the Boston Municipal Research Bureau regretted that she had to step away, but she's told me that if councilors have any further questions specifically for the BMRB, we can forward those and she'll get back to us in writing. So just flagging for everyone. Next up is Councilor Flaherty, then it'll be Councilor Braden. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief. I know that there's several members of the public that would like to testify. To the Commissioner, I know that you moved the deadline from, I think, February 1st to February 2nd due to the snowstorm. I've got several requests across the city from folks who missed the deadline due to COVID. In a couple instances, they were actually hospitalized. And given that COVID has allowed us to have tremendous flexibility in a number of different areas, just this week, the council voted to amend the city charter to suspend the special election for office of mayor. So didn't know whether or not, due to COVID, if someone could substantiate that, is there some flexibility with respect to the deadline? That's question number one. Question two is, can we freeze this decision in light of COVID, in light of everything that's going on in our economy and the crunch that it's going to put on residents and many who have potentially been out of work and or struggling. And then obviously lastly is the utilization rate. Has the usage rate of our exemption program stayed the same this year, or have you seen an uptick in that because of people's financial situations due to COVID? Thanks, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Flaherty, for your questions. Try and address them in order, and let me know if I miss one. So your initial question about deadline extension due to COVID, that is, I do not believe that is something that is currently within the parameters of our statutes that set the deadline. But I haven't had someone extensively look at that, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't fit into those deadline requirements. There's essentially the statute allowed us to move it due to the snowstorm because there's a specific language that talks about storms, and COVID I don't believe would kind of fall into that set of language. But that being said, that deadline was for if there was a concern about property data. And we, in general, we have gotten concerns about our property data, and we get concerns about our property data every year. We've also been getting a lot of concerns this year that are not necessarily about property data or even necessarily about the value, but more just the kind of amount of the tax bill, which is something that an abatement application isn't going to necessarily assist those people with. The deadline that we have, though, for our kind of our exemption programs and the deferral programs, that deadline is April 1st. So there's still time for constituents to take advantage of all those programs. If for some reason they aren't getting a residential exemption and they qualify for it, or any of the other programs, or if they want to look into a deferral program because they're having trouble paying their bills. And forgive me, I feel like there might have been another question, but I can't. It slipped my mind now. Did I answer everything?
We freeze the decision.
Oh,
yeah, the decision that's been made. Can we freeze that decision in light of everything that's going on in our world and in our city, and particularly in people's financial situations due to COVID? Is this the appropriate time to be doing this? My answer is no. My question, I guess, is can we freeze this decision?
the statute does not give us the ability to freeze property values. So that is not an option that is on the table for us.
Unless we,
Lastly, the usage rate, have you seen the usage rate go up compared to other years in terms of the exemption?
So I haven't, it can be a little hard to know exactly what the usage rate is until the whole exemption period kind of expires, because sometimes people apply early and sometimes they wait until the last minute. I haven't seen anything to make me think that it is dramatically increased or decreased. In general, some of our personal exemption programs that are related to kind of income and asset limits, historically, the utilization of those programs has been decreasing. And I'm guessing that is kind of tied to more and more people not fitting in within those parameters. Because the department hasn't made dramatic decreases in outreach. But it is just a guess.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, ma'am.
thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. I think my colleagues have asked many of my questions already. I do want to give some more feedback about the document that was sent out about the disclosure period. I don't think it was very clear. I think you got the sense your taxes were going to go up, and there was a phone number, a website to go to, but for elders especially, it's not an easily navigable, and I think many people just set it to one side and didn't pay any attention to it. So I think in terms of outreach, we need to really look at how effective that was. I'd be curious to see how many people actually contacted for advice and guidance on that as a result of that letter going out. We sent it out to a huge number of people, but I'd be curious to know how many people actually came back into the system to get more information. And then, in terms of abatements and reassessments, and the lag time, when we have a catastrophe like a global pandemic and a recession, it's really frustrating to think that we don't have any tools in the kit to help us recalibrate when we get hit with a global pandemic or a natural disaster that would help us support our residents. So again, I would really look forward to having a working session to discussing these issues in more detail. Thank you.
Councillor Braden, was there anything you wanted the commissioner to speak to?
Really just looking in terms of, and it's maybe something he can bring back to it, and he doesn't have this information at his fingertips, I'm sure. The number of people who responded to that disclosure letter and who followed up, because we send out thousands and thousands of letters. I'm curious to know how many people called in to get information. Just as an evaluation of how effective it was as an outreach tool.
Yep. Um, Happy to put together those numbers. In context, I can give you some preparation right now. The number of phone calls that we receive is small compared to the number of parcels if you're looking at it at a percentage basis. That being said, it might be useful if I provide some information related to call volume that we've gotten in past years as well. And because compared to that, the numbers have been pretty consistent. There was definitely an uptick this year, but yeah, everything is what you want to frame it as. But happy to provide that information and happy to talk about how maybe we can improve going forward.
Thank you. That's all I have for now, Councillor Bach.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Braden. And yes, we'll definitely send that over along with some of the other info requests from Councillor Campbell. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. Much of what I was going to ask was asked by my colleagues, but I did want to know, as a city, do we have any analysis on the average gap or the average shortfall that many seniors are feeling with the tax increase? Do we know on average what is a breaking point? Is it that they feel that is it $5,000? Like what do we know what the pain point is for most seniors in beyond just generally that taxes are going up? Do we actually know a pain point?
That wouldn't be data that I have available to me. At
Okay.
least in assessing. I'm not sure honestly if that's something that Age Strong might keep track of or maybe another
Okay.
area of the city.
I think it's worth for my colleagues and possibly one day bringing in Age Strong to see what on average, what's the pain point for seniors or what's the shortfall and what pushes them over the edge financially. So that's just one thing I'd love to see. I don't know if we do a working session as Councillor Braden mentioned, but it would be one point. And the other point, the reason why I bring that up is if we could find out what that pain point is or where specifically most seniors find it to become burdensome, that's where, again, the partnership with either institutional partners and pilot payments might be helpful, again, about bringing the increasing or at least adding more people to the table to help resolve some of those issues. Again, most of my direct tax questions were asked by my colleagues, so I'm trying to think of other ways in which we're trying to help seniors that the city could get on board, measure, and understand. And so I just bring that up. I understand, Nick, that these are really poignant for you, but to my colleagues, I think we would and should think about those things. Again, all of my good questions were already asked by my excellent colleagues, so I'll keep it at that. I look forward to the working session.
I should also note, Councillor Edwards, that I agree with your question, and I think that is going in a really good direction in terms of kind of considering programs that might be helpful to our residents, and making sure that they're programs that are going to definitely help our residents, and meet that need. And I think that data is an important part of getting there. So I want to thank you for that question, even if I'm sorry that I'm not able to answer it for you.
I appreciate it, period. Thank you, Councillor Bach.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And yes, I think, based on the conversation today, it's definitely my intention to keep this in committee and look for an opportunity for us to have a working session. I think that, and obviously, eventually anything legislatively coming out of the council on this is going to be filed as a ordinance, home rule petition, and go through government ops, et cetera. But I think that to exactly that point, for us, we don't want to create more exemption and deferral programs that aren't useful to the people who are actually experiencing the pain, right? And to your point, Commissioner, it sounds like some of the income and asset limits on the existing ones just haven't kept up with these rising property values. So they're just not as useful to the right folks. And then also, we're not looking to come up with programs that are, we don't want programs that aren't useful to the people who are experiencing the pain and who are trying to keep in the city. We also don't want programs that create giant loopholes and allow, big corporate actors to pay less tax, because frankly, the other side of helping our residents, right, are the programs that we fund with the tax levy. So I think that having some further conversation, trying to narrow in on what is the intervention at the state level, if we're all going to get behind something that would help the most people and also have the fewest of those unintended consequences. That seems like something that that we need to be talking about in detail conceptually before we're just, before we file something. So I just really appreciate Councillor Flynn bringing up this conversation in this context today, and you for being here to answer all the questions. I have one little question, and then I'm going to go to public testimony, which is just, and it's something that I had raised with you before, and I raised it up at the beginning here. This idea of, like, to the point about giving people notice, if there was any way for us to, in our property tax estimations that we send people, sort of like shift some of the expected increase onto the first and second payment bills, even if it came with a disclaimer that said, look, like, this is just based on a sort of back of the envelope projection, but something that would let people kind of smooth increases when they come. And again, this doesn't solve when people just get whopped with an increase that is just, like, in total, just way too much for them. But I have heard a lot of concern about that issue with when you have a big increase and you're catching up on it entirely across 2 payments in the back end of the year. It's just really tough for people who budget.
Thank you for your question, Councilor Brock. Yeah, so this really gets into kind of how our bill structure is set up, and kind of what the city is elected to do and what the options are that are available. So the default option for property tax bills is a single bill every year. So you get one bill and you pay the whole thing. Then there are elective options for either semi-annual payments or quarterly payments, and the city of Boston is elected to go with quarterly payments. And as you all are probably becoming very, very aware with, as constituents reach out to you, the first 2 payments are estimates, and they're based off of the prior year's tax bill. And that is the process for that is also the process and structure are set up within state statute. And so there's a limit on what the preliminary tax bills can be. And so the state statute does not allow our preliminary estimate for a tax bill to be higher than 102.5% of the prior year. So it allows for a slight increase, but then that increase is still spread over 4 quarters, and so each individual bill has the potential to be a quarter of that increase. So it doesn't really, I don't think the current statute, I don't think really gets to the flexibility that you're asking about to kind of give people higher preliminary estimates. I mean, it would be another statute change. It's maybe something worth looking into. It gets maybe a little bit tricky in terms of figuring out kind of like essentially the information that the city has when we send out those first 2 quarter bills, because the amount of that gets committed in I want to say it's around June. So basically how much we could kind of, even with the law change, how much we could kind of factor in terms of reality of what a value is going to be in June is going to be very complicated, because the department really does spend the entire year from in essence mid-January through November figuring out models and values for the whole city. So I'm not sure we could have that much precision by that point, but there might be an opportunity to kind of increase the amount asked during the preliminary period, so then there isn't such a pain point for the second 2 quarters if there is a value increase. but also not something where the city would all of a sudden owe people refunds.
Right. We certainly wouldn't want that. It feels to me like there might be an opportunity to even have some kind of an option in our interface that's like, okay, these are your bills, and you still do the estimates the same way that you do now. And then you say, like, are you looking to spread your bills more evenly? Like, and there's like a calculator that lets you like go ahead and pay an extra 2% or what. Like, I'm just thinking about how retirement systems sometimes work that kind of like give people that opportunity to opt in. And I don't know. It's just, it is something I've heard from, particularly I have obviously a district with a lot of very high valuations, and just the sheer amount that people are looking at now finding in the second half of the year is really hard. I want to go to public testimony. Councillor Flynn, as the lead sponsor, was there anything you wanted to say before I did so?
No, Councilor Block. I'm looking forward to the public testimony.
Okay, great, excellent. So going over to public testimony, I'm going to start admitting people. So I'll admit you to the panelist space, but I'll ask you to wait until I call on you to speak. And we've got a couple of people who are in the waiting room here who don't have a sort of first name. So I've got Galaxy S10 Plus and an SGD. So if either of you are looking to testify or you've signed up to testify, it would be great if you know how to change your name on Zoom to do that. And if you don't, to raise your blue hand, just because it helps us keep to the order. First up is going to be Iris DuPont. And then I don't currently see Felicia Spencer, Jose Tano, Hatui, or Joanne Green Brooks. They're the next three people. So if one of those names changes to one of those, or you raise your hand, we'll go to you. And otherwise, after Iris, it'll be Elnora Thompson and then Eileen Smith. And then it's Luanne, Eric, Joanne, and Rick, just so you all know that you're on the list. So let me admit a few folks. Right. And all right, I think I see Iris. So Iris, you're our first person for public testimony. If you want to unmute, you now have the floor.
Okay, great. Can I do the video too?
Yes, if you can, that would be perfect. There, we see you and we hear you. Excellent.
Okay, great. Thank you and good morning, everybody. I want to say thank you to all the counselors. They have all spoken to what we seniors in particular are concerned about. I want to say thank you also for sending out the notice. I was one of those people that read the notice, that was able to go online and figure out what was happening, finding out what our assessment was, the change in the value of our property, which was incredibly ridiculous. Every year it goes up $60,000, $70,000. I don't put $60,000 or $70,000 worth of work into my house, so I know it's no different. But again, it was nice to get the letter. I want to say that a lot of people that I've spoken to in my neighborhood association didn't understand it. They didn't know what they could do. They didn't think they could say anything. They just said, oh my God, this is happening. And I had called the office. The gentleman who answered said, yeah, that's happening to everybody. And I went, yeah, but no, no, I need to talk to somebody about this. And he said, well, we'll have somebody call you. I said, okay. 3 days later, nobody called. I called Andrea's office, Andrea Campbell. I told her what was happening, and her staff was able to help get me in touch with somebody at the one of the assessors, and we had a good conversation. My property is zoned as a 3-family, but it's an old Victorian farmhouse that is divided up very strangely, and I only have 2 income apartments here that are very small. And so it's not like I'm a regular 3-family house, a triple decker. You know, they're studio and 1-bedroom apartments that I rent out. So my income from that is very, very different. Also, I wanted to speak on the programs that are supposedly there to assist seniors. I find that the income eligibility levels are so high. I mean, my husband's on disability. I work part-time. I'm almost 70, and we make less than $50,000 a year. And the eligibility rates don't apply to me. I mean, it's just crazy. They need to be lowered. Something needs to happen. We've been in our house for 35 years. We can't afford to go. We don't want to leave our house because we can't afford to pay taxes. I mean, it's just crazy. And there are a lot of seniors. I live in Dorchester and Four Corners, and there are a lot of seniors in this area here. And a lot of people are very afraid that they can't stay in their homes because they can't afford taxes. So I think that's all I wanted to say.
Great. Thank you so much, Iris. Thank you for being with us here today.
All right.
Next up is Elnora, and then it'll be Eileen, and then Luanne. And I will just, we give everybody a few minutes, and then I'll just hold up my gavel. You'll see it if you're on video, just as a way to say if you can bring it to a close, just so we make sure we get everybody in. But really appreciate you all being here. Elnora, if you want to unmute yourself and come on video if you'd like. Still muted.
All right.
There we go.
My name is Elnora Thompson, and I live in Dorchester, Cotman Square area. I am retired and on disability. And this tax increase hit me like a big bucket of cold water. I have a 2-family house. I've been here over 22 years. And I have a tenant who is currently not working, so there's no rental income coming in. So I am very worried about this increase. And I've talked to a lot of my senior neighbors, and we are all at the same opinion. We are struggling just to keep up. And I don't qualify for a lot of the programs because my income is not that high. And my Social Security is not going up, and my pension is definitely not going up. So, and I called H Strong and discussed the tax bill with them. Then I called the tax office, and there was a young man down there. He was very nice, but he explained it, but I really didn't understand. It's really a big blow to all of us seniors, especially in the Cotman Square area, where the property taxes is going up because of all the new construction and new condos. And I know we're going to be hit hard with that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Elnora. Thanks for sharing. Next up is Eileen Smith, and then it'll be Luanne O'Connor, and then Eric Olson. Eileen? If you just want to unmute and turn on video if you would like to be on video. Eileen, we just need you to unmute on your side. Okay. Eileen, I think I'm going to wait. I'm going to jump to Luanne, and if you're able to unmute, we'll circle back to you. So Luanne, do you want to go next? Oh, now we just lost Luanne. All right, we're working our way through here. Let's Eric, I think we're going to go to you now. Eric Olson. You have the floor.
Great. Oh, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Great, that's awesome. So thank you, Councilor Flynn and everybody. I know this is a really kind of tough issue. The more I get into it, and I look forward to getting to know you better, Councilor Flynn. So I'm representing my community here, 250 people. We live at 150 Dorchester Avenue. I definitely want to, I appreciate this is affecting everybody differently, but it's definitely, I want to remind people that they representing all constituents, not one class over another. Definitely deep ties in Boston. All my grandparents are born and raised here, raising 2 little girls here. It's not an easy city to raise children. It's very expensive, and the schools aren't up to par as they could be. So, the striking thing for me is I have a background in computer science and finance, and when I downloaded all of the MLS data from 2019 for our building and compared it to our tax assessments, it was 30% higher than actual market sales. When I reached out to my friends at Zillow, they said they've dropped Boston city assessments from their algorithms because they are significantly unreliable inputs to real world market values. And now that I'm hearing kind of how these algorithms are built, it just sounds like there's a crazy thing going on here as far as how do you determine values of properties, and people are reaching out to me in the building. Everybody's losing their jobs right now. It's not one class over another. It's COVID's really going to change this landscape of city living. So I think you just need to make it more clear about how is this calculated actually, and it needs to be documented. And it seems like there's different tranches of things going on here. You also need to make it clear what we're getting for our taxes. It took me over a year to get a city light installed and crosswalks painted in our area. And the other thing, this is kind of a tough thing, but has the city looked into long-term budget efficiencies? For example, at Harvard University, salary freezes, no extra comp, and no bonuses, offered early retirement. As I look at kind of the city of Boston's payroll, 2019, $1.8 billion, and the top 10 earners took on an average of $400,000 each. So I think we need to attack this from multiple angles. I just really, I like everybody here, no matter who you are, was kind of like, holy crap, how can taxes go up by 30% and be off of actual market values? So that's kind of what I wanted to bring to the table, and I look forward to discussing it further and understanding how we can solve this together.
Great. Thank you so much, Eric. And thank you for representing all your neighbors. I see Luanne, so we're going to go back to her, and then I will give an opportunity to Eileen if we can get her, and then we'll go to Joanne and Rick. So Luanne, you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you great.
Awesome. I'd like to first thank Councilor Flynn for championing this issue, particularly here in South Boston. So, and I love the idea of putting together a working group with residents as well, whether that be leads of neighborhood associations or however that's chosen, but I would definitely like to be a part of that. So what I wanted to bring up, and perhaps, you know, the commissioner can weigh in on this as well. I did some research, and what I did was kind of Google of seniors means tested tax breaks throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it appears there's about 13 communities that have actually worked within, whether it be their town hall and or their city council, by putting together a home rule petition specifically for that municipality. So I'd like to see if Boston can actually do something very similar to that. And the home rule petition, I think, would be easier to get through the State House because it's not going to affect all of Massachusetts, because there are, in fact, tiny towns that depend solely on their tax revenue. So I don't think that it would be fair for Boston to go into a tiny little town and reduce it. So I just thought that that was a great idea. Some of those communities are affluent communities that are very similar to South Boston, as well as Councilor Block in your area as well. So we're talking Reading. I think they've done it twice. Hingham, Andover, Concord, Sudbury, so on and so forth. So it would be really great if we could look at that and see what they've done. And I don't see why Boston actually couldn't adopt it. So I'd like some feedback on that. And then the other thing that we need to look at is new growth. The city of Boston adds added value onto new growth. So while the city has a desire to grow, we're kind of there are certain groups that are being left behind. And as Councillor Flynn said, we don't want to lose the soul of our city. I don't think I'm ever going to forget that quote, Councillor Flynn, because it is, in fact, our seniors, it's our middle income, and it's families. So those three groups, it feels very real in my association in South Boston that we're not wanted. So when you get groups of people that are feeling that way about their city, that's really a mass exodus, and we don't want that to happen. The existing programs that we have, I don't think that they're effective in this day and age. And I would also like to look at nonprofits. Why can't nonprofits pay a larger tax amount? New businesses coming in. Amazon got what, a $5 million tax break? So we're giving large corporations and nonprofits really a big tax break, and it's coming back on to the residents of the city of Boston. I think we need to look at long-term residents as well. I myself am 5th generation on my mother's side, South Boston. My son is 6th. So we're multi-general families across the city of Boston in all neighborhoods, and we want to stay here. And there seems to be an overall attitude that the assessing of your home is great, the value is going up, and when you go to sell, I can't tell you how that sentence irritates me. When you go to sell, the long-term residents, we're here, we've been here, we're going out in a box. And then we want to pass our homes that we've worked so hard for, scrimped and saved. We want to pass it on to our children or to our grandchildren. So when you talk about deferral programs with interest rates, you kind of settle up when you die or when you sell your home. That's really not working either. So I think there's a lot that we can do because everybody brings something to the table insofar as their ideas. So that's kind of what I want to say, but I would like for the city to look at what other towns have done. I can send you the feed on it, and maybe we can do the same thing here in Boston.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. And yes, please, if you send us, you can, Councillor Flynn can get it to us, but also ccc.wm@boston.gov to the committee. We can make that part of the record on this and sort of use it as we're going forward in the working session front. So that's great. All right, next up, I want to see if Eileen can unmute. Eileen Smith. Just going to give her a moment. And Eileen, if you're on a phone, sometimes it's *6.
I think Eileen has to unmute herself too.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what we're waiting on. All right. Eileen, I'm going to go next to Rick, but if I'm watching, if I see you on mute, I will come back to you. But in the meantime, we're going to go to Rick Martin.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Again, I want to echo at first, Councilor Flynn, this is just, I can't say thank you enough for doing this. It's from the bottom of my heart. This is just amazing. And I want to echo Luann's and Elnora's and Iris's comments too, especially Luann's comments. I've been here for 23 years. We live in the Clam Point area of Dorchester. Moved here because I love the area. We bought an old Victorian. We decided to fix up. It's been a labor of love. We enjoy it tremendously, but the taxes that have been going up exponentially in this house has just made it almost impossible for us to stay. I'm going to be 62 in May. And I also am a small property owner in this area. I own 3 two-families in this neighborhood that I bought, again, invested in the area where nobody else would, because I thought, I want to see the area get good again, because Dorchester's just an amazing, amazing town. But I can't afford to keep my 2 families anymore because I only charge, I'll tell you right now, for one of my 2-bedroom apartments here, I only charge $900 a month for my tenant. And the market value on the thing's $2,500. I can't, in all consciousness, raise my rent to that level because these people can't afford it. And all my rents are well below $2,000 for 3 bedrooms in this area. And they're big old Victorians and they're in good shape. I don't understand why we're getting taxed on what you could sell a house for. Why aren't we getting taxed on what we bought the house for when we paid for it? And then when you sell it, then go ahead and start taxing people on that because it makes no sense to me. And I have been through the abatement process multiple times. I've talked to a Janice Brown and a Laura Esberg. That abatement process is a nightmare. And you have to have a degree in physics to get through this thing. And if they deny you because, you say, well, your assessed value is based on these sales, well, that's impossible. I have not done, I always said, work to my house of $100,000 increase. I haven't done any work on these places. I've maintained them and they've passed inspections, but would I like to upgrade them? Absolutely. But then my taxes are going to go up even more. So this formula on how we're taxing people has got to be fixed. I don't think taxing on what you could sell it for is logical at all. It makes no sense to me. We paid almost nothing for our single family home in '98 because nobody wanted to live here. Well, now I'm getting taxed on what a developer would pay for it and rip it into 4 condos, which is not going to happen. I will never let that happen as long as I'm alive because it's a beautiful old Victorian. And it's the first house that was built in Clam Point in the early 1800s, the very first house. So the historical significance of this house is huge, but what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years when I start collecting Social Security? I can't afford to stay here. Neither can my family. It's just horrible. So I welcome the thought of, especially the abatement process, like I said, because if they deny your abatement, you have to pay money to go to the state, hundreds of dollars, file that, and then you get hearings. Well, for the last 2.5 years, guess what? I've not had a hearing because they keep delaying it. So my taxes keep going up. I'm paying all this money, and I keep getting these notices from people over an assessment. Well, we have to delay it. We have to delay it. And for the normal resident, a senior, to go through this, thankfully, I've got, some of the education to be able to get through this. But for 90% of people who don't understand this, it's pretty damn intimidating, guys. But, I would welcome to be part of any sort of panel to talk about this. And especially let my tenants speak up because, one of them came to me the other day and just was so grateful that I've kept her rent on a 3-bedroom apartment at $1,500 for 4 years. But that's going to stop quick because I can't pay my mortgage. So when you're looking at these values on people who own primary residence, you also got to look at people like Iris, who has a 3-family, and she's getting killed on taxes with no income coming in. And you've got to give relief to the small property owners who are trying to keep rents low and also keep people in their homes who have been here. I've had tenants for 15 years. But some of them are starting to leave because they can't afford, I haven't raised the rents, but they can't afford other things that are happening in the city. It's a disaster waiting to happen, folks. And hopefully, this type of panel and all you guys get people together and we can work something out. That's it, Kenzie.
Thank you so much, Rick. I really appreciate that, and really agree that we talk a lot about ways to keep rent reasonable and sort of formal affordable housing. And there's a lot of informal rent control that's happening through landlords with a relationship with their tenants. And I think the idea of, it's an interesting question. The commercial assessments generally are determined based on kind of the income coming in, like a sort of survey of the leases, but residential, it's based on sales. And I think trying to think about creative ways, and again, it might involve state action, right? But think about what's the best thing to send to the state, something that rewards landlords who are holding their rents at that more reasonable rate in this.
Absolutely. That would be wonderful.
Really interesting way to go. I see Eileen.
Hi.
Eileen, well, I don't see you, but I see that you're unmuted. So let's go to you next.
Hello. Sorry for the delay. Thank you, Councilor Flynn and the elected bodies. Similar to, I have sent a letter as well. I don't know whether or not that is going to be read. So just to be brief, my sentiments are similar to Iris DuPont. I am in a family house. My sister and I are joint owners, both retired, a tenant who has no job and got hit with a $5,600 tax increase, which is absolutely really unacceptable, unbearable. As far as applying for, any type of relief, I believe that the connected incomes all automatically disqualify us for additional exemptions. I do believe that, I'm sorry, can you folks in fact hear me? I'm sorry. Okay. I do believe that any type of, $400 residential exemption for the senior citizens is not enough. I'm really hoping that, as discussed by Luann and that man, Rick, who just spoke, the council and they need to work to change legislation, to go to the state to make this happen. However, we need a moratorium put in place on next year's taxes. I strongly feel that with the amount of residential development, we are just being totally, we're going to be removed from our neighborhood very soon. We're really getting outpriced with the development that's being allowed in the city. And I know that we've been here, my family's been here, third generation, and we're starting to feel the pressure. And I don't know what type of exemptions can possibly be added. I support Councilor Flynn suggested long-term, senior residents getting some type of additional relief. And I really hope that, I know the process to appeal this type of situation to the legislature is timely, but we need something now. We need relief immediately. We need to definitely put a moratorium in place. COVID, there's no compassion to the city residents that are financially struggling. So I'm grateful that you are today on board and taking all of our thoughts into consideration, but I really hope that something can be enacted quickly to save the soul of the neighborhood, so to speak. So I'm grateful for your help. I just hope we can do something quickly to benefit the residents.
Great. Thank you so much, Eileen. And now I'm going to go to, we've run through the folks who had signed up with me, but I've got a few folks in the waiting room that I want to go to check if you want to testify. So first it'll be Elizabeth Rhodes, and then I'll go to Octavia and then Teresa. Elizabeth, did you want to say something?
Hi, I wasn't planning to say anything. I would just, now that I have the floor, I'd just like to add that what we need here is action. We need to have evidence that City Council is actually interested in what's going on the ground, rather than a distant set of numbers that are making these calculations. The city is us, we're people. And I have a good job I've lived here for 12 years. I'm getting taxed out of my house. It's unacceptable, and I think it's unnecessary. So I hope that you can get together with people to think creatively, work with the state instead of under the state's thumb. I mean, I was alarmed to hear our state representative ask why nobody had gotten in touch with him before this was put in place or before all this drama started. Some kind of conversation needs to happen so the left hand is in agreement with the right hand. Otherwise, we're getting dumped on and we're getting pushed out. And I'm stunned that I have a good job and I can't afford to live here anymore because of development, basically. And I just want to reiterate what I wrote in a letter to Ed, who's been wonderful about this. In an early meeting about development 12 years ago, Mark McGonigal said that it was in the favor of South Boston. It was to our advantage to support development because it would increase the tax base of the city and our taxes would go down. What was that all about? I mean, absolutely the opposite has happened. You can't have people walking around saying one thing and then the city doing the opposite. It's not working. Something has to change. So please get on this. It's not casual. It's important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Octavia, did you want to say something?
I entered the wrong information, but that's okay. I just want to thank you for putting everything together to help us out because I didn't really know anything about this. I found this out from another friend of mine. But thank you so much for putting something together. And I'm hoping that we're going to be looking forward to some good changes in our favor as seniors that own the home. The other thing too that I wanted to say, there's a lot of us as senior also that has what you call them, timeshares and stuff. If there's anything that could be done about that, a program to explain to them how, because I'm getting too many calls of people looking for timeshare owners to sell their property, and they're pushy, they're very pushy. So if anything could be done about that to a program to let us know who are seniors that have a timeshare, how to go about getting it sold or rid of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Miss Octavia, could you just say your full name for the record so we have it?
Octavia Collins.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Teresa, did you want to say something? All right. Then the one person, I'll wait if Teresa's got something, and then otherwise I've got somebody who's still under Galaxy S10 Plus in attendance, but did you want to say anything?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, my name is Joanne Greenbrooks, and I'm retired. And I live in the Hyde Park area, and I've lived here for over 25 years. And once I became aware of this meeting based on an email from a friend regarding the increase in the tax basis, because I read through the material and I thought that I understood it, but clearly there's much more going on that I didn't understand at the time that I do now regarding this whole increase. And I would like to make suggestions to the effect of in the long term, making changes in the state law, and in the short term, making the abatements and referrals and other programs that would help reduce the amount of taxes that the seniors are paying much more affordable, maybe even considering putting together a senior tax rate that would be in the long term beneficial to all people who become seniors. And therefore they know that there's a tax range. I don't know whether you'll base it on income or you base it on property values or what, but it all needs to be put on the table for discussion. And that's pretty much all that I have to say about it, and wanted there to be an ongoing discussion about it delaying the implementation of the actual tax collection, if that is possible. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Joanne. And I'm glad we found you for your testimony. All right. I think that brings to a conclusion public testimony on this. And again, I'm really grateful to the members of the public who came and spoke today. And also, you know, I think to Councillor Flynn's suggestion, we're only gonna get somewhere here if we keep public voices in the mix about what would actually make a difference and what are the things that are hitting you the hardest. And I think we've heard a lot of really helpful stuff from you all today. So I just want to thank everybody for that. And also to everybody who wrote into us with public testimony. So those have all been circulated to councilors. Councilors have read them and they also become part of the public record on this, which given the fact that we're going to continue talking about all of this going forward, like we're going to be keeping all of those things in mind. So again, I really want to appreciate everybody for participating today and Councillor Flynn for leading us off. Before we conclude, I want to give the commissioner an opportunity to say a closing word, and then I'll go to my colleagues, starting with the lead sponsor for a closing word. So Commissioner Arnell.
I just want to take a minute to thank everybody for their time today and to thank the constituents for voicing their concerns. Mr. Pond, I see that you're still here. I'm really sorry to hear that you had a bad experience with my department. I'm glad to hear that you were able to get in contact with someone through Councillor Campbell's office. It sounds like based on the income limits that you kind of mentioned that you might qualify for some of our programs. So I would encourage you to, hopefully it was just a one-off bad experience. So I would suggest that you call our Taxpayer Referral and Assistance Center to kind of talk through the details of some of those programs to see if there's something that you can take advantage of. Because all of our exemption programs they're there for people to take advantage of them. Like I want as many people as qualified to take advantage of them because that's why they exist. And I want to thank all the constituents as well that commented about, other programs and other home rule petitions and other municipalities. And I think that is something that is worthwhile for us to take a look at to make sure that we're always kind of staying on top of these issues. So I just want to thank everybody for their time and thank the council for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Councillor Flynn, I think a number of councillors just had to go to 11 o'clock. So I think we've just got you for a closing word and that's appropriate as the lead sponsor. So please.
Thank you, Councillor Bach, and thank you, Commissioner Arenello. I want to say thank you to both of you for your work on this important issue. What I heard today is, government doesn't have all the answers. In listening to the testimony of residents across the city, they provided some excellent feedback, recommendations, a path forward. So that would be something I would like to do. I know we talked about it briefly, Council Block, continue this conversation in a working session with you, Commissioner, in with the residents of Boston, and let's continue to discuss proposals on how we can address this issue. And, this isn't about blaming anybody. It's not placing the blame on the state or the federal government or the city government, but it's about coming together to see how we can solve a problem. So we might want to get some of our colleagues from the state government as well to weigh in. Again, some people from some residents and city officials, state officials. But what's important is listening to the residents, and the great feedback we received today will be helpful to us as we move forward. Again, thank you, Councillor Bach. Thank you, Commissioner Arenello. And I always say, and it's not just a cliche, but Boston works best when we work together. And that's what I saw here today. Thank you, Councillor Bach.
Thank you so much, Councillor Flynn. Yes, and I think definitely we should keep this docket in committee and have a working session. And I think, in between times, we've got a bit of work to do. Both we'll be sending some data requests over to assessing per some of the things that colleagues said today. And then also, I think that, look forward to working with your staff and others around some of the things that came up today. I think we could probably sort of write down as like a few types of options for the types of programs that we might be thinking about, and have something for us all to be talking about around a table or a virtual table in a working group context with the residents. But I just want to strongly echo your thanks to all the residents who made the time today to listen and then to speak and really talk about what the experience looks like for you on the ground in our neighborhoods. So thank you to the lead sponsor and to the commissioner. And I should say to Pam from the Municipal Research Bureau for being here earlier, and all of our colleagues. With that, this hearing of the Ways and Means Committee of the Boston City Council is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.